ELI5. Why do models like ChatGPT forget things during conversations or make things up that are not true? I once asked Chat to ask me 20 questions about my business and then based on the information to create a website for me. It was interesting because it told me it was going to work on it and would shortly send me a link I could check and then provide feedback. I was astonished. I asked how I'd know it was ready and it told me it would let me know. I asked for a status update the next day and it told me it was an AI model and couldn't do stuff like that. It was an interesting experiment. I think it was likely providing answers it compiled from consultants that make websites. The model doesn't understand anything. It doesn't think. It's just really good at these words look suitable when combined with those words. There is a limit of how many those words it can take into account when generating a new response, so older things will be forgotten. And since words are just words, the model doesn't care about them being true. The better it trained, the more narrow and close to truth will be that this phrase looks good in this context for a specific topic, but it's imperfect and doesn't cover everything. Hallucination is an emergent property of those complex language models. This is mostly related to the so-called context window. The more intricate the conversation is, the bigger context window for past information is required. Sometimes, there is no space left, so your old conversation data gets lost by being outweighed by new data. Then, if you try to recall some of the lost parts, AI will weight back that information, or autocomplete to the best of its abilities, hallucinating the missing parts. Because it's not artificial intelligence despite mainstream media labeling it as such. There's no actual intelligence involved. They don't think. They don't rely on logic. They don't remember. They just compare what text you've given it to what has been in their training sample. They just take your input and use statistics to determine which string of words would be the best answer. They just use huge mathematical functions to imitate speech, but they are not intelligent in any actual way. You're getting loads of opinionated answers, and many people claiming what is to think or not, which becomes very philosophical and also not suitable for an ELI5 explanation, I think. To answer your question, Chat repeats what it learned from reading loads of sources, internet and books, etc. So it'll repeat what is most likely to appear as the answer to your question. If the wrong answer is repeated many times, Chat will consider it as the right answer, so in that case it'd be wrong because ChatGPT is not a truth model. This has been explained from day one. ChatGPT is not intelligent or knowledgeable in the sense of understanding human knowledge. It is intelligent because it knows how to take natural language input and put together words that look like a response to that input. ChatGPT is a language model. It has no element in IT that searches for truth or a fact or knowledge. It simply regurgitates output patterns that it interprets from input word patterns. ChatGPT puts together words in a familiar way. It doesn't quite know things in the way you and I know things yet. For example, if you asked an AI which had fairy tales in its training, to tell the story of the Titanic, it could easily tell the story and then end it with the words "they all lived happily ever after." Simply because stories in its training in that way. Note though, that the matter of what would constitute AI sentience is not well understood at this stage. Sorry to say, many of the people responding in here don't know what they're talking about. ChatGPT forgets in the middle of a conversation because it's programmed only to keep a fixed window back. If they increase it, it would be bigger. In the future, as these things get better and they figure out how to scale it without using as many resources, it will remember every interaction it's ever had with you. People, please don't answer if you don't know. Very simply, they don't know anything about the meaning of the words they use. Instead, during training, the model learns statistical relationships between words and phrases used in millions of pieces of text. When you ask them to respond to a prompt, they glue the most probable words to the end of a sentence to form a response that is largely grammatically correct, but may be completely meaningless or entirely wrong. It's called a generative AI for a reason. You ask it questions, and it generates reasonable sounding answers. Yes, this literally means it's making it up. The fact that it's able to make things up which sound reasonable is exactly what's being shown off, because this is a major achievement. None of that means that the answers are real or they're made up, and only built to sound reasonable. It doesn't actually know anything. It simply predicts the group of letters it thinks comes next. ChatGPT looked at a whole bunch of information and analyzed the patterns. Using those patterns, it can seemingly write like a human, but only because it has looked at so much human written text. It doesn't actually understand what it's doing, it's just really good at predicting human speech. They're not actually intelligent. They're kind of like a theoretical Chinese room operating on a word or phrase basis. Chinese room is a long-standing AI thought experiment where you have someone who knows zero Chinese behind a door. One slides them Chinese characters and they respond with what should be the answer from a chart. They have no idea what they're reading or writing. I'll ask you another question. Why would you expect anything different? Why on earth would a word pattern machine have any concept at all of truth, facts, or memory? This is like asking why a piece of paper doesn't spell check notes written on it with a pencil, or why the microwave doesn't appreciate the compliments you give it. Why would it? Because they don't actually process information, just making a statistical judgment on words which sounds like a conversation on the topic. Much more akin to a skill many people have if essentially bullshitting rather than thr skill of someone who is actually an expert on any topic, because they don't actually process information, just making a statistical judgment on words which sounds like a conversation on the topic. Much more akin to a skill many people have if essentially bullshitting rather than thr skill of someone who is actually an expert on any topic, because they're a statistics program, not AI. They string together sentences based on what some complicated statistics math says comes next, but they aren't intelligent. They don't know what they're saying. And if the math says a falsehood comes next, they're going to say it, about forgetting it has a limit on the number of words it takes into account when answering. So if it is a limit of 100 words and you told them a flower is red 101 words prior to you asking about the flower, he does not remember the flower is red. This will likely be somewhat corrected over time. I assume it reads all information mostly uncritically, and algorithms will probably be tweaked to give more weight to more reliable sources, or to take into account rebuttals of disinformation. You know, when you let your phone autocomplete a text message by just clicking the suggested words, and it writes something that is technically a sentence but is almost meaningless? That's sort of what all these things are. They are meant to emulate human communication. Humans forget things during conversations and make up things that are not true all the time. If anything, I'd say those features make it more realistic, because while the neural network was being trained, that kind of behavior has been rewarded. In some topics, convincing sounding sentences would rate just as high or even higher as correct responses. I mean, to be fair, so do people. And people built things like ChatGPT to act, function, behave like people do. So it could be considered by design. It is only made to make things that look like they could be written by a person. It is not tested on how true something is, and thus gives it no value. Imagine just using the auto next word your phone thinks your text message is trying to say. That's what LLM do, except with a larger dataset. It also comes back to the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. Models are only as good as the data they are trained on.